While connected technology is essential for unlocking new efficiencies on the production floor, it's also presented hackers with new opportunities to steal valuable IP and data. To support OT professionals in their battle with cyber criminals, we launched the Security Breach podcast. In each of our over 100 episodes, we've brought in cybersecurity specialists to provide valuable insights and break down critical topics. As a go-to podcast for our listeners, we want to help you align your brand with our expertise. By sponsoring our podcast, your brand will build trust, and your message will stand out to an audience searching for tools to assist their cybersecurity efforts. Secure your share in this rapidly growing segment by sponsoring Security Breach. Contact us today to learn more. Hi, I'm Jeff Ranke, Editorial Director of Manufacturing.net and Manufacturing Business Technology. Welcome to Security Breach. Winston Churchill famously stated that those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. His concerns about applying lessons learned to post-World War II foreign policy initiatives rings just as true in the current cybersecurity climate. So in an effort to ensure we repeat as few of 2024's mistakes in 2025, we're going to take a look at some of the industrial sector's biggest exploits and offer solutions and strategies in our ever-raging combat with the Black Hats. First, let's hear about a unique supply chain hack that came up during our conversation with Theo Safrakis, a cyber risk and information security expert at Fortra. Circling back a little bit, Theo, to some of the supply chain stuff, we've had some pretty high-profile supply chain attacks in the last year, even just in the industrial sector. Are there any of these that kind of stand out to you as being maybe a turning point or one that really woke people up to the fact that this is a big deal, this is attacking a lot of different industries, a lot of different enterprises of different sizes, things of that nature?
Well, the recent example affecting the auto dealers across North America, I think is going to be an example used by many because this is an example of how one supplier breach could have impact of millions or even up to $1 billion of operating costs in the sector. I'm not sure you're familiar with the cyber attack targeting the CDK Global, a company that provides software to handle financial transactions for car dealers in North America. Well, the data breach lasted about 2 weeks, which made over 15,000 car dealers not able to do financial transactions. And this only stopped because there's a belief that the affected organization probably paid the ransom that was holding their systems hostages. And it's believed that there was a ransom paid of almost $25 million.
Whoa.
So, and if that ransom was paid, well, that money is going to be used by these cyber criminals to power and enable a lot more attacks on a lot of other sectors. The impact, though, was not only to that organization, it was to all the car dealer companies that were using that software. So we're talking about a loss of up to $1 billion that may have occurred as reported by various news media. So that's one example, but there's a lot more that probably don't make it to the news that in some cases I'm familiar with is manufacturing organizations that we're working with that kept having repeated ransomware attacks. And these kept coming in through their suppliers. Their suppliers had, they had thousands and thousands of suppliers that had access to their systems, access to their network, and they kept introducing ransomware into their network. Obviously, they had a zero tolerance for ransomware. They never paid the ransomware. They always tried to recover the systems as fast as they could. But we helped them improve their phishing detection process, their response capabilities. It takes one person to click to fall a victim, but at the same time, it takes one person to detect and alert someone to prevent the harm from spreading. And also, they introduced a new and reinforced awareness program, not only to their employees, but also to those suppliers, right? If those suppliers were small companies, they did not have a formal security program, well, that organization extended its own security and awareness program to those suppliers in order to protect its own systems and networks.
Yeah. It's interesting. You bring up a couple of different points there, and I'm going to present these like they're black and white issues. They're not. They're more complicated than that. But what advice do you give folks when it comes to being ransomed? I mean, it's easy to sit here and basically say, well, don't pay it. We don't want to pay it. We don't want to fund terrorists. We don't want to fund criminals. But when things are down, especially on a plant floor, that's a tough decision to make. Where do you stand when it comes to paying the ransom?
Well, if you're prepared and you have no choice, you may have no choice, but start by being prepared. The first step, because after that, you have no excuse if you didn't take whatever precautions you could to prevent from paying the ransom. And even if you pay the ransom, it doesn't mean that you will be able to recover as quickly as you think. I've seen examples where the ransom was paid and it still took 2 or 3 weeks to recover the systems because the decryption was so slow. Right. So it's always a last resort. I cannot advise on whether you should pay or should not pay. Best advice is be prepared to recover and only pay if you are left with no other choice, or if not paying will result to a bankruptcy or a closure of your organization.
The fall of 2024 brought security compromises to the front door of a number of prominent industrial enterprises, including Halliburton. In late August, the oilfield services giant confirmed that its operations had fallen victim to a cyber attack. Details began to emerge when Halliburton filed a notice with the Securities and Exchange Commission acknowledging that it had learned of the attack and immediately activated a response plan. This plan included taking affected systems offline, as well as notifying authorities. In the weeks following, the Houston-based company confirmed that an unauthorized third party had removed data from its systems, but Halliburton did not believe the breach of the data would generate material impact. The attack put the energy sector on high alert. According to IT security firm EFT Sure, this business segment has become increasingly attractive due to its valuable IP and critical nature, adding in a recent blog post that this incident follows a pattern of attacks on oil and gas companies, including the Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack in 2021. And despite Halliburton's suggestion that the breach was immaterial, it did admit that it would likely see financial losses related to the event. According to the SEC filing, Halliburton said certain expenses could continue to occur and that the company remains subject to various risks because of the hack. The focus on key infrastructure firms doesn't stop with Halliburton. In early October, the largest water and wastewater utility in the U.S., American Water, was also hit. The company provides services to more than 14 million people in 14 states and 18 military installations. It reportedly became aware of unauthorized activity in their network and immediately shut down certain systems. While the company does not believe its facilities, data, or operations were impacted, it did have to pause billing and customer account access. Staffers were also asked to work around the clock to investigate the nature and scope of the attack. The ongoing concern for these types of incidents is what it could lead to down the line. The hackers could have simply been probing to see what the response might be, or trying to draw attention to one soft spot while planning to exploit a different vulnerability in the future. CBS News also reported that U.S. officials have become concerned about the efforts of Chinese intelligence to breach critical U.S. infrastructure networks, like water treatment facilities. An earlier report from the Wall Street Journal also tied a similar type of cyber attack against U.S. broadband providers back to Beijing. In early August, millions were impacted when National Public Data, a major data broker that performs background checks, reported that 2.9 billion personnel records from over 1 million individuals in the US, the UK, and Canada were accessed. The stolen records included full names, current and past addresses, dates of birth, phone numbers, and even some social security numbers. This type of data not only sets the bad guys up for fraud and identity theft scams, but could lead to social engineering schemes that garner more data and provide access to vital personal and professional logins. The group behind the attack allegedly offered the cache of info up on a dark web market for $3.5 million. According to Eyal Benishti, the CEO of email security firm IronScales, the breach is part of a much broader and concerning trend that's been growing for some time. Citing Splunk's 2024 State of Security report, data breaches have become the most common type of cyber attack experienced by businesses in the past 2 years. As far as remediation strategies go, Benishti recommends operating under the assumption that data key to your organization was compromised by the attack. This means taking some basic steps, like changing passwords and login IDs. Manufacturing organizations should also be extra vigilant with email communications, as threat actors will be using leaked information to execute sophisticated phishing and spear phishing campaigns. With 64% of breaches still linked to human error, a key part of standard responses to such hacks should include ensuring regular security awareness training and phishing simulation tests for everyone in the organization. The last hack we'll discuss targeted Ford Motor Company. The data breach, which was seen as an extremely embarrassing incident for the automaker, stemmed from the hacking group's Intel broker and energy weapon, stealing 44,000 records containing personal and product information. Paul Bischoff, consumer privacy advocate at CompareAttack, stated that while Ford is a big name on energy weapons' list of victims, it doesn't appear that they stole anything especially sensitive. However, that could change, and Ford might later reveal that sensitive personal information was compromised. Chris Hawk, consumer privacy champion at Pixel Privacy, was in agreement. He stated that Ford could later announce that additional information was stolen in the breach, adding that the automaker has faced customer-facing breaches in the past, including a 2019 hack that impacted 100,000 Capital One customers. Next, we're going to hear from Anna Wells. She's the executive editor of manufacturing.net and Manufacturing Business Technology. She's going to discuss a hack from this summer that has crippled a global beverage maker.
Established in 1938, Stoli Vodka has long been a fixture on the liquor market, though it appears it will need more than its legacy to carry it into the next generation. Stoli Group has revealed that its U.S. subsidiaries, Stoli Group USA and Kentucky Owl, have filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And while the reasons behind the decision are diverse, one stands out. Stoli USA says a ransomware attack played a role. A November filing contends that an August attack on the firm prevented the U.S. subsidiaries from complying with their lenders' reporting requirements. According to the Cyber Risk Alliance, the attack was not widely reported and has not been claimed by or attributed to any specific ransomware group. Recent reports add that the attack took down Stoli's ERP system, which led to the company employing time-consuming and costly manual workarounds in areas like accounting. They say the systems will not be fully restored until at least Q1 of 2025. But it's certainly notable that Stoli has had other issues. In a desperate rush to distance itself from its Russian roots after the country's 2022 invasion of neighboring Ukraine, the brand ditched its original name, Stolichnaya, in favor of the shortened Stoli. It's worth mentioning that the company's owner, Yuri Shefler, is a longtime Putin critic, and the company actually operates out of Latvia, though its operations have been complicated by Russia's attempts over the years to claim Stoli as a state-owned business. Meanwhile, inflation and demand fluctuations have also influenced profitability. All in, Stoli says these factors combined have resulted in the company's accumulation of $84 million in debt. Safo's latest State of Ransomware study contends that the cost of recovering from a ransomware attack has increased 50% over the past year, to an average of nearly $3 million per incident.
And we'll close out with a story from earlier this year describing how some of the basic tools found throughout a manufacturing plant can become pathways for the innovative hacker. Hey, Andre, thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to Security Breach. We're really excited to kind of talk about a unique vulnerability here with Bosch. You know, we know it's about an assembly tool and some of the different potential things that hackers could do to exploit this vulnerability, but maybe you can kind of lay it out for us a little bit. Tell us what we know so far.
Okay. First and foremost, thank you so much for this opportunity to be here. So regarding the research that you have done, so we as Nozomi Networks Labs have analyzed this Bosch Rexel Smart Node Runner. It's a pneumatic torque wrench that is certified for safety critical tightenings and heavily used in automotive production lines. So basically, we discovered this device while we were investigating real-time locating systems, which is the research that we presented at Black Hat USA in 2022. We discovered that some of the vendors were offering these integrations with these tools, and so we decided to give it a look, and found a total of 25 vulnerabilities, of which 11 are high risk and 14 are medium risk. Not only that, basically many times we are always asked, okay, you found access to the tool, but what can you do actually with it? So we wanted to practically demonstrate what an attacker could have done at that point. So we proved it. We demonstrated with proof of concept exploits that an attacker could have implanted a ransomware on the device, which could be used to cause production line stoppages and potential large-scale financial losses to asset owners. And another exploitation that we have practically demonstrated is that a threat actor could have hijacked the tightening programs surreptitiously without even the the operator being aware of that while manipulating also the onboard display so that the tool would have applied a different torque value than the one that is shown on the display, causing undetectable damage to the product being assembled or making it unsafe to use.
That is incredible in terms of, number one, identifying those exploits and the potential opportunity, if you want to call it that, for hackers here. When you're talking about automotive assembly and all the different safety elements there, we've done stories and we've talked about it here, talking about Boeing and some of the issues they've had, understanding that's aviation versus automotive, but there's a parallel there when we start talking about safety of transportation devices that we just count on and don't think a whole lot about. So I guess the next question there, has there been any proof of anybody trying to utilize this exploit to get at these tools?
No. So far, basically, we have Nozomi Networks have a telemetry system where we're able to monitor basically all the tracks that are happening in our customers' networks. And so far, we have not been aware of any actual attempt to exploit those vulnerabilities. But of course, we've just released this research. So
what about Bosch? Have they responded in any way, shape, or form? Are they issuing any kind of patch or offering any type of advice in terms of how to negate this vulnerability or these vulnerabilities?
Yes, of course. So first and foremost, I would like to thank Bosch Rexroth for the cooperation that we have done. We've done a beautiful cooperation together to along this disclosure process. So Bosch Rexroth right now is still working on patches to patch all these vulnerabilities. Is committed to provide patches by the end of January, as far as I know. And meanwhile, has provided some mitigations to their customers. We also have provided some mitigations in the article that we have published in our website while waiting for the patch from Bosch Rexroth.
Excellent. We'll definitely include a link to that in the description of this episode so everybody can get at that information as well. You know, Andre, I think one of the biggest things that the industrial sector has gotten better at, and they've had to over the last 3 or 4 years, but we are getting better at learning from our mistakes when it comes to cybersecurity here. What do you think can be some of the biggest takeaways from this situation that we can apply going forward?
I think this is my personal opinion as a researcher. This is yet another confirmation that security is ubiquitous and no device, even drills, can be considered exempt from security requirements. This especially happens, let me say that happens a lot in the OT and IoT. In many cases, the security model of this device stands on obscurity. The fact that the device doesn't have consumer technologies, is not available to the general public, and as such, the perception is that it's difficult to exploit and it's not necessary to secure it as hard as the phone that we use every day, which is hilarious, let me say. This research is the perfect counterexample. I mean, not only in the end we were able to purchase this device through a third-party reseller, but also we were able to analyze it, reverse engineer it, and find very, very risky vulnerabilities. I mean, at this point, what if we were the bad guys? What if the drill crypt ransomware that we developed, let's say, as a proof of concept, as an exercise, was not only a proof of concept, but a fully fledged double extortion ransomware?
No, it is mind-blowing. And I mean, do you think does a situation like this, does this result just from the fact that the attack surface is getting so big? We've got more and more connected devices. We tend to think more about automation platforms and software and HMIs and things like that. And you mentioned mobile devices being another big thing on the plant floor. Man, how are we going to think about assembly tools as well? You know, it seems like a very daunting task. And I guess, is there some steps or some best practices that you could share in terms of, boy, getting all of that stuff as soon as you possibly can? I guess it just seems overwhelming at times.
Yeah. Well, personally, I don't think there is a secret recipe here. Security is and has always been a never-ending process. It's a process. It's not, let's say, a target that you reach once and you forget about it. It doesn't work like that. It's a process. So, actually, there is nothing. All the security, let's say, principles that we apply for IT also work here. So segment your networks, apply strong security access controls, expose only the services you need and only to authorized people, use strong password, train your personnel. None of these steps by itself is enough. but they are all vital to avoid that spread of ransomware or any other, let's say, nefarious activities that may happen. And even with the not runners from Bartraxo, the same rules apply. Actually, in our own mitigation, we exactly stated all those pieces of advice, because in the end, this is what actually works.
Gotcha. One of the things you said, Bosch is working on some patches and some things to solve these vulnerabilities. Again, a lot of these suppliers have gotten so much better in responding with these types of patches. We've talked about things with Siemens. We've talked about things with other large automation platforms, Rockwell, whoever it may be. Those patches, though, create some issues in and of themselves in the operational technology environment because you got to shut stuff down in order to implement those patches. I wonder if you have any perspective there on maybe helping the audience deal with the fact that we have to apply them, but it also impacts production flow through and operational efficiency and all those things. How do you balance that?
That's a very good question. The answer is very, very difficult. Let's say there's not an answer for everyone. In the end, I think that in my opinion, it's always a matter of risk in this case. Yeah. It's not only the base score of the vulnerabilities per se, but also I would say the surrounding context of the vulnerable devices. So if your security posture is ideal, meaning that you have networks that are well segmented with well thought access controls, passwords are continuously changed and are strong, you regularly perform trainings and all stuff like that, you may, let's say, wait a bit for a more convenient moment when to apply the patch, because the risk for you is, let's say, contained. There's still a risk, but it's not too high.
Right.
If your security posture is less than ideal, I would probably schedule the patching at least of the high-risk vulnerabilities ASAP, because, considering these vulnerabilities, all an attacker needs to have to be in position to exploit them is just one access to your network. If just one of the employees uses a weak password and maybe hasn't even enabled two-factor authentication to access the company VPN, then it would be trivial. It would be actually trivial to exploit those issues. So this regarding the specific vulnerabilities, from a global perspective, that's again my personal opinion. I'm a great fan of over-the-air updates, so auto updates, and wish that many more devices would support them. After all, today not only IT software, such as we are, of course, very, very accustomed with the auto update with our own browsers or with our own computer, but also our own cars are getting more and more auto updates. And cars are, let's say, the cousins of OT equipment. They're not super different. So I hope that, the strategy is working. It has proven to be robust enough, let's say, for production. So probably I hope that this strategy gets adopted by more and more manufacturers of OT and IoT devices, because it has proven to dramatically decrease the downtime and the cost of patching.
That's interesting. I haven't heard that before as far as using the over-the-air updates for more of these industrial systems. That's an interesting approach. Does that open up some other than security concerns too, making sure your Wi-Fi networks are secure and all of that as well? Or is it,
of course, it is. Again, it is a process. So also the auto update needs to be secured in terms of firmware integrity and connection that is encrypted, and all this stuff need to be applied by the vendor, of course.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, one of the things I always like to close up with here, Andre, is just any trends you might be seeing going forward. This is an interesting vulnerability. Is this something we're going to see more of? Is this just another part of the endpoint security battle that we're constantly fighting? Or are there maybe other big trends that you're seeing that could really impact industrial cybersecurity?
Okay, so I don't want to sound boring, but I still remember the day when I first tried ChatGPT and I was simply shocked. When I copy-pasted a snippet of code coming from one of those open-source vulnerable web applications designed for training purposes, and it was able to find the vulnerability inside the provided code, and it was also able to write an exploit for it. So everybody could have done it. Everybody, even without very, very little background. Yep. So in my opinion, given this extremely low barrier, we will see more and more AI-generated malware in the coming months. And what is worse, what is my opinion, is that this is going to be AI-generated malware that will exploit 0 days. Because, if it is that simple to find vulnerabilities, why limit an AI to prepare exploit for known patch vulnerabilities that maybe the target of the criminal has already patched? How about just making it find some unknown vulnerabilities so that we are even sure that our target has not prepared in advance for it? Simultaneously, another trend that I think will happen, and it's a specular one of theirs, is that there will be a race done by companies to find more and more zero-day vulnerabilities in their own products. Fortunately, to this extent, AI doesn't work only for criminals; works also for also for the internal security teams. So let's say that I believe in the next months we will see a big boost in terms of CVEs found along.
Two critical vulnerabilities were recently uncovered in Siemens Automation License Manager, a software component that is widely used in industrial control systems and in distributed control systems environments. These vulnerabilities carry the potential for bad actors to gain access to files restricted to high-privilege users. This access would allow the hacker to manipulate files and licenses that would provide privileges, allowing them to control and potentially disrupt operations, steal sensitive data, or launch further attacks from within the network against other systems. Siemens has identified a couple of workarounds, but we're going to talk with someone with a greater understanding of the situation and what it could mean for the industrial sector. It's now my pleasure to welcome Eran Jacob, Head of Research at Israel-based Otorio, to the show. So first of all, thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate you coming on Security Breach. And I guess we can kind of jump into the reason you're here. Let's talk about some of these vulnerabilities that have been uncovered with Siemens here. Maybe you can just sort of set the situation for us a little bit in terms of what we know at this point.
Sure. So first of all, happy to be here. We are talking about two vulnerabilities that are basically chained together into some interesting flow of exploitation, targeting a component called the Automation License Manager by Siemens. This component, we've actually noticed it while we were researching a distributed control system, the PCS7 by Siemens. And we've noticed this component is installed automatically on all of the servers and even on different solutions, not only the PCS7. So we decided to check it out. And after diving in, we've managed to get remote code execution, kind of a logical flow, leveraging some unexpected behavior of some Win API that were being used. And finally getting a way to just write files directly to any path on the system, move files around, and take files remotely. This was actually pretty severe threat because it was not some kind of memory corruption. It was a pretty logical flaw. So these kind of vulnerabilities are much easier to exploit and much more reliable. And this is why we were urging to make sure clients and users are in general aware and fixing these issues as soon as possible.
And Siemens has responded to these vulnerabilities. Their response has essentially been, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but either upgrade or maybe adjust what you're doing. Essentially, they've presented some workarounds. But I'd like to get your take in terms of what their solutions. How impactful are they? Could they have done more? Or does this seem to be the right approach for Siemens, or what's your take there?
So I've been working a lot with Siemens, and they are always very responsive and very quickly handling any kind of security issues. And this was not different. We've got a very responsive team to work with us, and we've collaborated. And even though it was kind of different vulnerabilities, they managed to reproduce it and fix everything pretty quickly. They offered two mitigations. One of them is mentioned in the hardening guide, which is always good to follow and may protect from future vulnerabilities if there are any. And it is to disable the network access to the service. This service is optional. It is for licensing, and the network access to this service is for convenience. So you can set up your licenses remotely from other machine. So in production, during most of the time, you don't need to be enabled, and this is a good mitigation. It is not perfect because it can be still used for privilege escalation and other use cases, but it is very effective. And of course, you can always patch, and it's very important. One thing I think that is missing, and it is kind of wider issues these days, is the fact that this component is kind of SBOM. It is a component installed as part of other software. And I believe many users might not be aware this component is installed on the system and might not follow the right advisories. And advisories for these components are not directing to which components that are usually installed by clients. For example, PCS7 is not referred in the advisory. So it is kind of tricky, and I guess it should be handled such any other SBOM.
Yeah. Is there something that we can learn there from this situation? Is there something we can learn either in terms of educating ourselves when these vulnerabilities arise so we can respond to them more quickly? Are there best practices that you might offer in terms of increasing that awareness and responding as quickly as possible, I guess?
Sure. Yeah, we have been talking about DCS, distributed control system security, for a while now. And one thing that users can do, and is very effective, and almost nobody does, is fully following the vendors' security guides for these systems. Basically, these guides are not part of the deployment guide, but they are expected to be implemented directly after it. So the system is working, and now you are expected to walk through a very long and sometimes complex guide in order to secure a system. And every time there is a new guide, you should look for what's different. But at the end, these guides are reducing risks significantly. Siemens recommends on this guide, even before, to remove this connectivity if possible on some systems. And we just don't see enough users to follow this, maybe because it's very complex. We've tried to release hardening tools, automated one, open source, for some systems, but still users should do their best to make this kind of project of enhancing the security, at least according to the vendor guides.
Absolutely. You know, previously you mentioned patches as well as a potential solution. When we look at industrial control systems, that's hard because we got to shut stuff down in order to implement those patches. What's your take there? What advice would you give to others in the industrial sector, especially manufacturers, who are confronted with that situation where they want to address these vulnerabilities, but downtime is really hard to manage, especially right now?
So the big word in auto security is segmentation. And it is the right solution for immediate remediation, especially for non-critical services such as this one. And I'd suggest first to understand which connectivity is a must, disable this connectivity, and only when you have the option during some maintenance time to patch the vulnerabilities. Many times you can take a look at some kind of vulnerability management and see that you have some 100 vulnerabilities in the network, but if you inspect closely, if you have proper segmentation, maybe none of them is even accessible from a realistic attack scenario. So first, segmentation. Second, verifying for the specific attack scenarios in your environment which vulnerabilities are really a threat and really can be exploitable. I think we have some new scoring systems such as EPSS that can assist with that also. But in general, first segmentation, afterwards, if you have the maintenance time.
And have we seen any specific exploits, anybody taking advantage of these vulnerabilities specifically? Any successful hacks as a result?
So we meant to demo this as a possible attack scenario, but I haven't received any update from Siemens regarding in the wild exploitation, but we might not be aware of this because it's common on some use cases today to have information about these kind of attacks, but in OT, on many cases, we don't have the internet connectivity for getting the metadata from the system to detect exploitation. So we might not have an idea about exploitation of this vulnerability in the wild, even if it would happen. I hope it is not exploited in the wild, but we probably won't know if it is.
Interesting. Gets back to that key issue of visibility and understanding networks and what's going on within them, which continues to be a challenge throughout the industrial sector. One of the things that we're seeing too, Eran, is this huge uptick in attacks on industrial control systems. Right now, we're talking about some key vulnerabilities. Just kind of like to get your opinion. Are these conversations more positive because we are seeing things more quickly and discussing them and presenting solutions? Or is there also some negativity tied to this because we're basically promoting a potential avenue of approach for the bad guys? Is it sort of a counterbalance situation, or is there more good in one of those instances than the other?
So it's really a good question. And I think when discussing vulnerabilities, publishing vulnerabilities and discussing the details of them, it's even a bigger question. And the answer is yes, it's good. And it's good because when you look at networks that does not aware about any security issue, they're very much back in security terms. It is not surprising to see Configure or some very old viruses traveling around in OT systems. And we must raise this level of awareness within the OT network for security. And I think that OT also has the privilege to limit more than in IT. So working properly, setting up the environment according to practices, and doing some assessments and following specific steps, we can reduce most of the risk. And this won't be done without this awareness. So we are giving the option to the user to prevent this instead of hoping for good.
Absolutely. Early on you were talking a lot about segmentation as well. It's something we've talked about on Security Breach quite a bit. I wonder if you could offer some advice there, because I think sometimes when we look at these vast industrial networks, it can be very daunting to try to even just start the process. If you're going to give some advice to somebody who's looking to introduce that segmentation strategy, what would be your advice in terms of where to start, or some key elements to make sure you have, or you're looking at, or get involved in the process?
First of all, it depends on the resources you have. If I would suggest one guy in his network to find some first steps to reduce risk, I'd first suggest to, if you have firewalls, check out the policy. I think just inspecting firewall policy for not too long, you notice that there are many bad practices and firewall rules that are allowing traffic from places that should not allow. And if you know your network, usually just inspecting your firewalls once, you introduce a lot of misconfigurations and risks. And after you've done some review for your firewall rules, I think segmentation should be very strict in OT areas. We should not allow anything that is not a must. And we see many times some connectivity that is just more convenient to allow everything from one cell to another cell. And it is keep raising as an issue in different environments, especially when cells can be on remote sites. So I think just keeping it to the minimal required, as always, is the best approach. More than this, it really depends on the environment and requirement and threat.
Thanks so much for joining us today. And to catch up on past episodes, you can go to manufacturing.net, IEN.com, or mbtmag.com. You can also check Security Breach out wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple, Amazon, and Overcast. And if you have a cybersecurity story or topic that you'd like to have us explore on Security Breach, you can reach me at jeff@ien.com. I'm Jeff Ranke, and this is security breach.